So I'm going to make another file called, we'll call it test this time, test.java. And this will have our public static void main. Okay. So I want to write a method that is going to print all the integers from 1 to 255. So I'm driving, you guys are navigating. Tell me what to do.
Make the method
So should it be public, private, protected?
public.
Public, right? Because we want to call it in that other file. So public. Is it going to return anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. What's it going to return?
And
Hopefully all the integers between one.
No, that's we're only
255.
printing. So
Now read the the instructions. Read the instructions carefully. It says
it's
print,
void, right?
right? Yeah. So we can just make it void. That's fine. And let's just call it I don't know. Print 1 to 255. Okay. What do we do?
loop through 1 to 255.
Okay. So I equal, we're going to start, where should we start? 1, 0?
1.
Start at 1, okay. While I is less than
255.
256.
256.
256. Yeah, good
Yeah,
point.
yeah. We could either do less than or equal to, or if we did less than or equal, then we could make it 255. But let's just do it this way.
Mhm.
I plus plus. And then what do we do in the loop?
This out.
Sys out. Yep.
Sout I. Right?
Yeah.
Do you guys ever have John as an instructor?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
What does he always say?
A little bit of code and test.
A little bit of code and test. So we don't want to keep going. We've written 4 lines of code. That's way too much. We got to test it, right? We're going to make sure this works. So how do we test it?
Just call that method, right?
Yep. So how do I call it though?
You got to create a instance of that class
Mhm.
inside your test Java.
Right, exactly. My class is called basic 13. So I'm going to say basic 13. That's my type. Basic 13 is going to be the instance, and then new basic 13, right?
Now you should just be able to do basic 13 dot print, right?
Print, yeah, where is it? Let's check.
It was up
There
there.
it
I
is.
seen
There
it.
it is.
Yeah.
Cool. See if it works. Look at that.
Hey,
We did
got
it.
him.
Cool. All right, let's do the next one. Print integers from 0 to 255. And with each integer, print the sum so far. Okay, so let's not be lazy. So I'm going to say public, right? Because we want to call it somewhere else. And we're printing again, so we can just say void. I'm just going to call it print ints and sum.
Quick question about void, Tyler.
Mhm.
So void because we're not returning anything?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
the whole reason for void. Okay.
Yep. We have to have the return type as part of the signature. That's just required. So basically, if there's no return keyword in the body of the function, it's void. If there is a return, look and see what type it's returning, and then just put that there. Okay.
So you have to be mindful about what you return at all
Yep.
times.
Got to think a little bit, a little bit more carefully about what you're doing. All right, so we're going to loop again, right? For int I, and you know what? It's been a long day, so I'm going to steal this. There we go. Get rid of this. Okay, so we want to go from 0 to 255. And what do we want to do?
We want something to keep track of the sum.
Right, we got to keep track of the sum. How are we going to do that?
That
Let's define a variable called sum or something.
Yeah, sum equals, what should I set sum equal to?
Or you could just say int sum, right?
Yeah,
Because it'll be 0.
int sum. I was trying to test you and you guys caught on to me. Yeah, so int sum.
sorry to
And
interrupt
then-
you, Tyler. He was
That's okay.
saying that you could just do int sum and then nothing after that, right? Like, so not saying setting it to equal because it'll
No.
default out.
No.
Yeah, but set it to equal, or else when you're adding something, what is it adding to?
Right. You
But I
have
thought
to.
these guys defaulted, right? To something. So just like a string defaults to a null, a float or a double defaults to 0.0, right?
Let's see if it works. I don't think so. Let's see. So we would do sum plus equals I, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's mad. Let's see.
It's mad, okay.
What does it say? Can't get the error to come up. And it's probably just like uninitialized variable because we've declared it. But I think if we want to use it, we need to initialize it, right? So if we were to just print sum, it would print 0, but we want to store something in it, so it needs to be initialized.
Oh, okay.
So sum equals 0. I know it's a little confusing. Now why are you mad at that?
Right.
Huh. Int sum plus equals I. Maybe it's because I don't use it. There we go. Yeah, just wasn't using it. Cool. So this is going to increment our sum, print out the number, print out the sum so far, hopefully. Okay, we want to test it. So we don't need to, once we have our instance, we don't have to keep redefining it, right? We can just use the same one. Basic 13 dot print ints and sum. Let me comment this one out so we can see what's going on and run it. Cool. Looks pretty right to me. Okay, makes sense? All right. Let's do the next one. So given an array, find and print its largest element. Okay. So public void find and print largest. Okay. So this is given an array, right? So what do I need to do?
Fine.
Create an array, right?
Yeah, well, create an array, but do we need to create the array here?
In the other file. Test
Yeah, we
job.
want to create the array over here. So let's say it's an array of ints. So let's do that now. Let's make an array of ints. How do I do that?
Array list.
So we don't need to make an array list, right? We can just, all we're doing is just finding the largest element. We don't need any of the methods associated with the wrapper class. We could just make a simple C style array. Right, all we're doing is finding the largest one.
So you'll do int bracket and then the variable name.
And we could do it, probably the easiest way to do this is just declare it with a literal. So we'll do 2, 3, 6, 43, 70.
Probably a stupid question here, but what do you mean by declare it with the literal?
So the other way to do it would be to say new int and then give it a size,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
right? So I could do it this way, or I'll leave that there for your reference. So we'll say int nums2 equals so
Like the way
I'm
you're
actually
doing
just
above.
passing. I'm sorry.
The way you're doing it above, would you have to go like dot add for each
Yep.
one? Yeah, okay, I
I
gotcha.
mean, there's a couple ways to do it. You could make a loop and add the items in a loop, right?
Mhm.
But that would only give me consecutive numbers. I could also generate random numbers, but yeah, this is probably the easiest way to do it. The actually hard code the array. Okay, so we want to pass this array into this function. My method. God, I need a shocker to shock me every time I say function. So what do I set up as the parameter? Okay, so I could call it anything I want, right? I could say the array, right? But what type is this? I have to specify what this is going to be an array of.
And
And how do I specify that it's an array?
bracket.
There you go. So now this method is ready to take an array, right? So at this point, let's just sout it and test it. So I want to say basic 13 dot find and print largest and pass it. It's already passing in nums1 for me. So if I run this, I get my array, and if I want to see it, it's arrays dot toString nums1. Save it. Run it. Uh-oh, what did I do? Basic 13 find and print largest. Oh, I put it in the wrong place. Okay, sorry about that. We're passing in nums1. I want to put that over here. Hmm.
Yeah, it seems to not like your nums1 for some reason.
Is that? But that's fine, right?
No, it's not red.
Yeah. Okay. Arrays cannot be resolved. Where? On 10.
What is array? Oh, you put to stain?
I sure did. There we go. Good eyes. Good eye. Still mad.
Well, what is the raise?
Let's try something else. And code. Test.java. It's got to think for a minute.
Did you import it in basic 13.java? Like the arrays?
I
Maybe
did.
it-
I thought it did. Oh, it didn't. That's why. There we go. There we go. All right. little bit of a sidetrack there. So now we want to find the largest element. So how do we do that?
Then we set a variable called like maximum.
Okay. So max equals what? And what is max going to be?
Int.
Right. And it's going to be an int.
DR0.
I like it. Why not just set it to 0?
Because they could all be negative.
There you go. Exactly. So we assume that the first element of the array is the biggest, and then we do our loop and see if anything else is bigger, right? So I just told you what we're I just told you what we're doing. So what do we do? How do I write it though?
Or int I equals. Would you just start at 1 because you already have 0?
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
And less than the r dot length. And then
Just plus. And then this is, I forgot to talk about conditionals. I just realized.
I'm assuming it's an if statement. It just
Yeah.
says like, if the array at I is larger than max, then max is now that number.
If the array at I is greater than max, right? Oops, max. Max is the array at I, right?
Mhm.
Cool. And given array, find a print largest. So we want to, after the for loop, what do we do?
Print out max.
Yep, print max.
Yeah, max.
Cool. So going back to our test, we should see 87. All right. So fingers crossed, drum roll. There we go. We did it.
Nice.
Cool, cool. All right.
what was the static part doing?
So we'll talk about static tomorrow. Static is, and that's a really good question. Okay, so in Python, I don't know, you guys had Spencer, right? For Python?
We had mixed, like, some had Tyler T.
Oh,
some
they merge you guys?
Yeah, they
Okay.
did
Um,
after Python. I had Spencer for the record.
okay, so if we wanted to make a method in Python, a class method, do you guys remember how you did it?
You initialize some, you do like class. You make a file for it and then you define at the top you do like init something.
Right. So if you have a recipe, and then you had a dunder init, right?
Yeah.
And any method you had that was a class, or I'm sorry, a instance method, you would just say def print recipe.
You do like add class method.
There you go. There you go. Forgetting this recipe, right? Whatever. So if I wanted to make this a class method or make another method that is a class method, I use the class method decorator, right? And then any method I define under that is a class method that can be called on the class itself, right? So if I come down here and make a recipe, well, I don't even need to do that, right? I could say recipe dot say class, and since this is a class method, I could call it directly on the recipe class itself. This one though, and I said this, it's supposed to be self. So if I want this one, then I could say I would need to make an instance of the class to be able to call the instance method, right? So I would say recipe equals recipe. And now I could say recipe dot print recipe, right? So that's the difference between a class method and a instance method, right? So the instance methods are called on instances of the class. Class methods are called on the class itself. So if you were doing something like recipe.getAll, right, that would be a class method.
Yeah.
You can also have class variables. So anything you define up here outside of the dunder init. So if I had like a total recipes equals, have it default to 0, this would be a class attribute, right? So if every time I made a recipe, I wanted to keep track of how many I'd made, I could do recipe.total recipes plus equals 1, right? So total recipes would be a property of the class itself. And if I'm losing you, we'll talk more about this tomorrow. But what static does is essentially replaces this idea in Java. So if I want to make a method a class method, I can say public static void. Okay. And same thing with, if I had attributes, I could say private static, I don't know, info. Oh, it's gonna have a type. Okay. So this, if I wanted to reference these or access them, and I can't make it private actually. So the benefit of making this one static is in our test, instead of having to create an instance of our class, instead of having to do this, I can just do call our method on the class itself. Okay, so since I made this method print 1 to 255 static, I don't need an instance of the class to call it. I can call it on the class directly. Okay. And again, if I lost you, I'll talk more about this tomorrow.
Can I do one more quick question on that?
Sure.
So do you even need to instantiate the class above on line
No.
5?
Nope.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, and to make that, if this is what we're doing, right? If all we're doing is making methods that we don't need an instance of the class to call these methods, right? So we could go through and make them all static, which would obviate the need to do line 5. We could just make them all static, and then we could just say basic 13 dot, make them all class methods or static methods. Okay. Any other questions? All right, I'm losing steam. So if anybody wants to keep going, if you guys want to keep going, you can. The algos are on the repo, so if you want to keep going, you absolutely can, and I'll hang out. My voice is I feel like I'm getting sick, so not good.